There you go. So I found a thread in the talks, which was the very personal aspect of the experience of what everyone is going through at this time, as well as the referencing, to see the current suffering within the context of our past suffering, or even historical suffering. And so there is the dukkha that it's being experienced at this time for some is not just about the hardships at this time, but it can also trigger and bring to life. So we do a sound check to make sure. Venerable Sudhamma, can you hear?
I can. I'm straining a little bit to hear you. Maybe it's my karma for giving a video that was so poor in sound.
I've turned mine off now.
Yeah, I try to volume you a little bit up, but it's up to the top at my end. So maybe you just speak.
I'll speak later. Wake my neighbours up.
Right, I think that'll do.
It's night time here, Venerable, so there must be about 12, 13 hours apart. In just going back over those talks, that was the thing that touched me the most, was about the personal experience that everyone's had with their own suffering previously, and how to bring that into the present of understanding what's happening at this time. It's one of the questions that came to my mind was when we consider impermanence and we consider dukkha, suffering, they're much easier to contemplate when we're not actually suffering, we're not actually in danger of losing anything. So my question to that is, and you all touched on it within your talks, is how to both keep that internal, not to be swept away by the fear and of what could happen, and the what ifs of what could happen to me and to my loved ones. Ayya, would you like to speak something to that to start with?
You mean Ayya Sudhamma, or?
Ayya, I'm using the on the screen, so Ayya's using Venerable on her screen, and you're.
Oh, I see. Okay, understand. So, yes, if you wish, I think everybody in their lives has had some traumatic experiences. There is nobody in this world probably who hasn't. And I think it's really a power, the power of the Buddhist teaching that enables us to transform that traumatic experience into something good, into something beneficial. And I think that when we listen to the Buddha or to the teachers now, then we can find ways how we can transform our suffering through understanding. Then we can learn how we can manage to deal with the fears. And I think what is important is that each of us has a different access to it. There is not one way to overcome fears. I mean, there's the Buddhist way, that for sure, but each individual has different capacities, has different possibilities to overcome these things. And I think it's very important to use that, to find those things where to find our strength, whether that is the understanding of anicca, of dukkha, or whether we have a great compassion or confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, whatever that is, there are certain things that we can rely on. And I think when we each find our one thing, then we can start to much easier, much faster, get into places where we really can overcome our traumatic experiences. Oh, hi, Jenny. Just see her coming in. Wonderful.
Sorry. Took a while. I had to. Okay.
So yeah, I think really this, for me, it's the present moment awareness that keeps me in the good spirits. That's what I can talk with people. I can say them, well, for me, it's the present moment awareness that really can keep me or you in a position where you can overcome your traumatic feelings. And Jenny's here now twice. Or as we found it as a community, to practice the Brahma Viharas together. That is wonderful. This prevents us from being desperate by just developing all the time and just being every single moment in one of the Brahma Viharas. So this is how I try to keep up the good spirits here at Ananja Vihara.
I really enjoyed the part in your talk in terms of using both the practice of the monastery in a way that connected to the local community and then extending that further with making the masks. So there was both that internal and external action, right action and right view. Thank you. Jen?
Yes.
Hi there, Jen.
Hi, sorry for the delay.
All right.
May I also address that same question?
Yes, Venerable.
Well, there is a typed in question asking, how can I, to the effect of how can I have compassion with suffering when I haven't really suffered myself? I've had an easy life. I think it's a wonderful insight to know that a person has themselves had an easy life. But there is even suffering in breathing. Breathing in, then there's this need to breathe out. When you're breathing out, then suddenly there's this need to breathe in. If that's interrupted, right there is some suffering. Or if you still don't feel like you've had any suffering, just sit still without moving for an hour or 2 hours, and then you'll know the nature of the body. And then you can universalize that. You can say, wow, this is what the real nature of the body is, that if I don't even shift around within an hour or 2 hours, then there's this great discomfort and rebellion of the heart saying, no, it shouldn't be like that. So then you know the nature of suffering, and you can understand there are people who can't change circumstances that they find unbearable, and then you know, then this is what the world is suffering. So that could help you have the empathy that you were seeking. And addressing the question, I think one way is to universalize in the sense of I forgot exactly how your question was, our moderator, this question was worded, but to realize I am not the only one who suffers. You know, everybody, every being suffers, and so there's something in the scripture about that. It's not exactly coming to mind, but recognizing that I myself am not the only one who suffers is part of the spiritual solution. And another spiritual solution to the suffering going on around us right now is letting go of whatever we cannot control. And I found that spiritual people from all the traditions I've encountered who have really this incredible quality of surrender of the heart, we're just arm in arm in understanding. So I think from every religious tradition, there's this wisdom, this recognition that we soften our hearts to accept exactly the way things are at the moment. Not to say that we don't need to take actions, but take them without the grasping, without the hate, without the confusion, and let the heart be soft and open, surrendered to the way things are right now, and surrendered to whatever it is that we look to for refuge. And in our cases, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And there's one anecdote, a story from the scriptures. It might just be a Jataka. I don't remember where it comes from, but there's an account that there was a monk who was accosted by bandits in the forest, and they decided they needed to kill him, maybe because he was a witness. I don't remember. And he begged them, please don't kill me. Just let me live a little longer to do my practice. So they broke his legs and left him for a little while. And under that urgency, despite the extraordinary pain of 2 broken legs, he attained full enlightenment. When the thugs returned, they found him radiant, and they ended up being unable to kill him. They were quite moved to find his change in condition. So I don't necessarily require that of myself or anyone else, but I find it inspiring to think that that can be possible.
Thank you, Brenda Paul. I think, Jenny, your example of sitting with the separation from your granddaughter was a lovely example of leaning into the dukkha, if you like, and sitting with it, accepting it, and then to see what it is, and to see beyond the immediate of what it was to start with.
Yes, and Giles, I think about what's called Buddha's great departure, when he left the palace and for the first time saw human suffering and decided to leave his wife and child and set off. It's kind of like almost the situation I'm describing is the reverse, but I've been plummeted into a kind of necessary isolation and to focus on the practice. It's almost like that's the hidden benefit in a way for me of COVID-19, is that it's really pushed my practice much more deeply.
One of the speakers this morning, Venerable Panyavara, I'll have to look at it. Panyavara, not Panyavara, that's another monk. But he was saying it's like game day. It's now we do all our practice, and let's study the teachings. And an event like this is like game day. It's time to put those things into practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's certainly what I've been feeling, and I think that also when I first encountered what's called the 5 daily recollections, and I began to practice them, I am of the nature to grow old. I cannot avoid aging. I have the nature to become ill or injured. I cannot avoid illness or injury. This is such a powerful practice to help learn and drop clinging to life, in fact. It's such a great teaching.
I'd like to ask the bhikkhunis, in terms of the supporters, what questions are they bringing to you this time, Venerable Sudhamma? Is there a... Oops, can't switch the speaker.
Sorry, I have to think about that for a second. Ayya, do you have a thought right away?
Well, I could say that we're not much in contact, in live contact with the people now. They are stopping at our front door and we stay 2 meters apart, and they are dropping off their dana. They are dropping off their foods, and we are 8 people. We need a lot. We need a lot of water. So people are coming and supporting us. And they don't come with questions actually, but they come, of course, with concerns and with sorrows. And all these sorrows is, of course, how can I protect my my mental well-being in this time? How can I not freak out by having to stay at home, by my daughter or my children doing terrible things and turning out to be not the problem at school? No, being the problem at school, not the teacher being the problem. So this is the major concern of the people. How can I, in this situation with the people I'm staying with, remain mentally healthy? Because everybody needs some safe space in this isolation. We need some individual place. That's what I feel. That we don't sit on each other's laps, and in the houses of the people sometimes there's just no room when they live in small apartments. So still we might be privileged that we live in small apartments, or they live in small apartments, but for them it's still challenging. And well, what I am telling them is what I said earlier. Look at the present moment and look at the love. These are your loved ones you're staying with. So if no matter at all, if they go on your nerves or whatever they do, you have to love them and to forgive them. But that was just one encounter that was a bit more difficult. Most people are quite okay. Venerable, did you come?
Well, I think what I'm seeing mostly is anxiety, just plain anxiety. They're either telling me, well, I'm over this age, I have these and these health conditions. You hear that people around them are not socially distancing in a way that would be fully supportive to their well-being. Also economic insecurities. We don't have the safety nets in this country that you would expect of the USA, at least of the reputation we used to have. And so people there's a kind of a quiet desperation going on. Where I live, I hear gunshots at least once a day, usually about 10 or 20 shots at a time. So I don't know what's going on with the drug dealers, but there seems to be some sort of upheaval going on in the drug distribution chains. So it's pretty much daily. I only report it if it's real close. If it's some distance, I can't give them any special information. So I think just the quiet desperation is the main thing that I'm seeing, and that's actually what I was hoping to address in the talk, pre-recorded talk. And again, I'm so sorry the sound was terrible. I have old equipment. I don't have good equipment, or my phone is the cheapest on the market. I recorded on a device that was manufactured in 2012. So what to do? It's not up-to-date stuff. And it was the first time I ever sat down and recorded a Dhamma talk. Never done it before. It was kind of intimidating. I just never sat and did it like that.
That was the lovely meditation you gave us, actually. In the beginning, you gave a really lovely meditation, guided meditation.
Thank you.
Jeni, I might just reframe the question slightly for you. If you could make a documentary at the time, what would you make your documentary on?
I'm actually making a documentary now. Well, I started it before COVID-19. I've been working on it for a couple of years. It's actually, believe it or not, it's on the topic of impermanence. And I thought it was a really, like, I wanted to really study impermanence, not intellectually, but experientially through the teachings of the Buddha, and make a film from that place, if you like. So that's what I'm working on. I was very lucky. I have a Super 8 archive of 30 years, and the National Film and Sound Archive here, they acquired it and they digitized it for me. So that's my raw footage, and I've now got it in my computer, and I'm working with that footage and using that footage to tell the story of impermanence and the passage of time, something like that. So it's very interesting to be doing it now, because I kind of, I try and approach working on it as a meditation. I try and approach working on it and get guided by texts in an intuitive kind of way. So for instance, you know, I have on my desk, so like at the moment I've got Basho's, the Japanese poet, haiku poet, his The Narrow Road to the Deep North. It's such a wonderful book of poetry, and the essay about traveling across Japan. He's in about the 1600s. And so I have these texts that support that endeavor that I turn to, like Basho is great. He was a layperson like me, but he was very drawn to Buddhism as he aged. So he is regarded as a Buddhist poet. And his poems are really very, very beautiful, and on impermanence. And there's another great text which is just called The Japanese Death Poets. And it's a book of collected poetry by the Zen monks and the householders. As you might know, there's a tradition in Japan of writing poetry about when you're an elder, about preparing for death. And this is what Basho did, you write poetry which is to express the great beauty of life amidst your knowledge of the transience of life. As a gift, your poem or your film or whatever you're painting, whatever it is a gift to your community, to your children, to your society, as your insights into transience, and how beautiful life really is in all its complexity, including a time like now. It gives us so much to contemplate a time like now. Even how I began in my talk tonight, or the recorded talk, about the previous pandemic that was here when the British arrived with their ships. You know, that pandemic, which is not that much discussed in the white population, but in the Aboriginal population, in the survivors, in the families who have lineage to that time, it's felt very, very keenly. It's very, very alive. So I find it a very rich and deep time, that notion of deep history, like digging into all of those different layers of archaeological time. Yeah, so the film is, I'm making the film from that space, yeah.
You could say that the last 20, 30 years have been, I often refer to my parents because Dad was born at the beginning of the Depression. And often when I, talk to Dad, I go, well, you were born in a time of deprivation, and I'm in a time of abundance, although that abundance appears to have come to an end for many at this time. Do you think the question is it a reckoning or a time of awakening?
Well, there's so many layers to that question. I think it's both a reckoning and it's an awakening. I mean, for many people who've lost their jobs and who have no work and who, for the first time, I mean, same in America, wherever, but the queues, for the dole queues, the unemployment queues are akin to the Depression. For young people who are in those queues, or middle-aged people, elderly people, but a lot of young people in those queues, middle-class people who've suddenly been thrust from what you were saying, a life of, plenty, to suddenly really, looking into having to live very frugally. I mean, live like a monk, but they've had no training. The training's not there. So I think that's, for them, that's not an awakening. I just think that it may become an awakening as, there's all sorts of positive things that are growing out of it, a lot of sharing that's going on and a lot of support that's happening across communities. I sense that happening. So that's a kind of an awakening. And I think also a sort of an awakening that, I mean, people are talking about it now. I think someone was saying in one of the talks yesterday, for the first time, there are some people in India, certain areas of India, who can see the Himalayas for the first time. Or dolphins have come back into, the waters of around Mumbai, the question of global warming, which was so strong an issue just before, and is, COVID's really kind of swept through and is sweeping through, but global warming is still a huge issue, as is, and I think one of the venerables yesterday, or was it this morning, I can't remember, spoke about the proliferation of war weapons. All of the big economies that focused on war and in this crisis don't have enough masks or PPEs for the health workers. I mean, surely our people must become aware of this incredible insanity of the budgets that go to war, and there's just not the budgets to clothe the health workers at the front lines. I mean, this is really criminal. I mean, so hopefully there will be some awakening around that. I don't know, but I would hope so, because surely the world's budgets financial budgets have to be reallocated in some way that starts to face the reality of people's real lives. I think that's what's happening. That is potentially an awakening. I hope.
Yeah. And Venerable Sudhamma, how would you find it? Because in your own experience, you used your previous dukkha, that became an awakening for you. How do you think it might be able to become an awakening for others, rather than a reckoning, I guess?
I don't want to try to do something predictive here. I really don't know where it's going to go. I certainly hope that the ability to see how lovely the natural, how lovely it is when the natural world gets to recover a bit. I hope that will bring a strong, steady, worldwide support for profound change. I don't know if it will. In terms of everybody on the, I don't know how it's going to land. I don't know if people are going to withdraw further into their personal concerns or their own little bubble around their family. I don't know if they're going to realize that bubble extends to their whole community and the world. I certainly hope that happens. I don't know. I saw written in the Q&A someone asking about how to deal with pain. Is this a time to address that, or will that be brought up later? Is it time?
Yes.
So they wanted to know how to deal with the pain. And then there's the pain of the mind, or you could say of the heart, and then there's the pain of the body. Dealing with pain in the body, the first thing is that if we relieve the pain in the heart, of the mind, then the body, pain does not seem so overwhelming. There's actually some science behind that too, that when there's more pain in the mind, the pain in the body becomes more intolerable. I think one of the earlier presenters spoke about the two arrows, that if a man, there's a metaphor by the Buddha or simile that if a person was hit with an arrow, how much more tragic it is if he's hit with two arrows. The first arrow being the inevitable problems of bodily existence. Bodies don't cooperate. Bodies hurt. I've heard someone say you have a hand, the hand hurts. You have an eye, the eye hurts. The body pain is something that comes along with this whole situation of embodiment, of being. But the second arrow is the reactivity, the distress, the grief, resistance, outrage, anger, despair, dismay, and these we can address. Well, any one of them, individually. This is when one of these comes up, you can address that. Specifically regarding pain, when it gets to a point where it's like a scream in your mind, I found a trick, which is to notice. Doesn't have to actually be that bad, but when it got that bad for me, when I had cancer, I found this trick where you notice the pain and you let it fill your mind. Don't think of anything but the pain. Put your mind on it 100% and notice how it's changing. Because pain cannot be a solid, unchanging push. It has to be a repeated and not, what's the word? It cannot be in a real pattern. It has to be an irregular hitting of pain in order to even experience it. If it was anything steady or even rhythmic, then we would tune it out. So it has to be repeated little stabbings of irregular intervals. Well, in between each stabbing is a non-stabbing of the pain. So you focus 100% on only the stabbings, let it fill your mind, and then switch to the non-stabbings. So I would do that when in agony. And then after I switched to the non-stabbings, I would stay with the non-stabbings for about 30 seconds, minute maybe. And then I would turn my mind to a book or a conversation or something, and I would be free of pain for about 10 or 15 minutes. So it was just a little trick that I discovered from my then rudimentary exposure to Buddhism. And regarding the pain of the heart, we could talk about that quite a while. There's the pain of separation from those we love. There's the pain of being with those that we don't love or don't like so much at the moment. There's getting what you don't want. There's not getting what you want. This is very classic pain, and the Buddha's entire teaching is geared towards addressing that.
Ayya Phalanani, would you like to? Is there anything you'd like to add to that part of the discussion about whether it's a reckoning or an awakening?
Oh, right. Yes. Like Jeni, I would really say it's both. And it's not only both because there are so many different people, and some tend towards reckoning and others tend towards awakening, but also within ourselves, within myself or within the others here in the community, I feel that there's also both present. There's the possibility for reckoning and awakening. And I think in wherever it goes, we as individuals must take care that it goes into the awakening direction. And we as Buddhists have it in our hands, say more maybe than others, that it can really go into that direction. Whereas others who are really struggling are possibly don't have that option, or they don't come to the conclusion they just bulk by and go along with their fears. So yes, it's presently both present in this world, and I like to cherish the possibility of the awakening. And I'm totally positive to everyone who comes with a face of despair or with a feeling of anxiety. I'm answering totally positive that yes, it's possible that there will be awakening out of this situation, but it needs you, which means every single individual, to do it. So take care that your despair stays low. If it doesn't go away, just don't get lost in it. And yeah, but I see, for example, my mom, she's several risk groups. And sometimes she had a little down and thought, oh, I'm getting it, and then I'm dying. And I was one of those who were born in the war, in that terrible time, and now I'm dying in that terrible time. But then we talked a little bit, and she just changed her attitude, and the change of attitude was just possible because of all the way she thought. So, and I think if we as Buddhists or as people can get to as many people as possible with a positive attitude, towards awakening, also with visions of what may be possible, of what can happen when we go towards awakening, then I think, yeah, why should it not happen? If it's just small.
So using that, the opportunity that we have while we're sheltering in place, what would be the best way to shelter in place, to take refuge at home?
Well, as I said earlier, that for me, the present moment awareness is one of the most precious teachings of the Buddha, because we can combine it with the Brahma Viharas, and most everyone, not everyone, I admit that, but most everyone has some positive traits, has some positive experiences, has the knowledge of how to transform trauma into something positive. So if we take that in our daily life, our positivity, our not optimism, I'm not speaking of blind positivism, but really a knowing of it's me who lets it go down the drain, or it's me who is lifting it up. So this thought, I think, very simple, but already can help. It doesn't need much. But that constant thought of don't let it go down the drain, for example, or lift up, lift my partner up, lift my children up, lift my colleagues up.
Could I make a comment?
Yes, Jen.
Sure.
Just to follow on from that, I think that sheltering in place for me, in a way, is a stream that can go side by side with, well, perhaps it's engaged Buddhism, but being connected to communities in a very compassionate way. An example is, again, here I give Australian examples, but the elders in the Aboriginal communities who are at risk in the outback communities from not having a place to shelter in. What can I do to help, for instance, that situation? Well, the organisation Get Up has recently emailed everybody a video about the situation and has asked people to spread the video and try and put pressure on the government to allocate funds to these communities so that they get enough food and so on. And I just think that's a very tangible example of, while sheltering in place and focusing on one's own practice, there is this capacity to reach out and support others who are really needing support in this time. Because yes, I'm very privileged. I can shelter in place. So I give that example of the elders, and there's many others one can think of. Just a small one that I do in the voluntary work I do with the refugees, the Tibetan refugees, is I help them with settlement and citizenship issues, trying to become Australian citizens and helping with the tests and so on, and the English with that. And, you know, it's an incredibly rewarding, while sheltering in place. I do all of it now on the phone or on the internet. And I asked one of the ladies that I mentor the other day, what did the Dalai Lama say to you? What was his guidance to you for living through this time? And she said to me, well, Jeni, I'll send you the green Tara. Just sit with the green Tara, the mother of all Buddhas, and sit on the compassionate mother of the Buddhas, the green Tara. And I thought that was a very beautiful teaching that she gave me. So there's this potential mutuality, I think. So it's not just sheltering in place in an isolated way. It's sheltering in place just like this forum is doing. We're sheltering, but we're reaching out. And I think that dualism, that doing both, is really necessary for me. And I think for that possibility of that awakening, one has to reach beyond one's own borders and reach really beyond all of the national borders, because this is across all borders now. And it's a potential for us to meet globally in a way that's pushed us further towards that possible global connection with so many.
And Venerable Sudhamma, would you also, in terms of sheltering in place, Venerable, what would you recommend?
Well, first of all, I think it's good to pay attention to how much time is spent in escape. I've just noticed a little bit on, in passing on what comes up in my feed online of people discussing various games and other things to pass time. But this is still our lives. We don't want to just pass the time, but to try to make use of it. I think the most important thing to do is try to think of who may be a little too alone right now and make those phone calls. Some people are flourishing online, but there are a lot of people who don't even have computers, don't have modern phones, and so I think being aware of who's isolated, and if there's no way to reach them with any electronics or phone, then send them a card, send them a letter, something. Just let them know they're not forgotten, because I think the most painful aspect of this whole thing, aside from fear of death, is the isolation. It's quite burdensome to a lot of people. While I'm speaking, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I need to call so-and-so. That's important. I just want to put in a little plug here, a little kind of an announcement. that I'm told that the hospitals in New Jersey and New York are begging for baby monitors because they're turning regular rooms into intensive care units, and they need to be able to see the patients without a window that's normally would be there. And so if people can dust off baby monitors, they'll clean them up and make use of them. But that's a way that people could be also pitching in.
Staying connected in isolation. It's and not getting preoccupied with just our own kind of, I guess, difficulties. Is it's, I think what you've all recommended is keep looking outwards as well, to use compassion, to understand that you're not alone in your suffering at this time. One of the questions that came through was that, you know, as Buddhists, sometimes we get too caught up in ritual and practices, or even dogma, I guess. What would be the antidote to that in this time? Although I think the answer is self-evident, but it would be nice to hear your advice as a panel about how to protect oneself against that self-preoccupation and adhering, I guess, out of anxiety to what would normally be good practice.
Well, I think a certain amount of that is actually important to maintain. You know, to do the rituals that put a person in touch with their faith, with whatever they're believing in, what's grounding for them. I think staying in touch with that is very important. But going deeper, you know, dig into the scriptures, dig into the meanings behind the words. If you're just chanting empty rituals, even if it is in the beautiful sacred language of Pali, if you don't know the meaning, but find out the meaning and meditate upon it. Take it in a little deeper.
Giles, just to make a comment on that as well, following on, one of the Aboriginal elders here has this saying called "quiet country." Listen to country. It is quiet. That's the country that has been cared for, not colonized. The country that's not wilderness, not that notion of the wild or wilderness, but quiet country, which the custodians have cared for over thousands and thousands of years. And they say, take care of country and country takes care of you. That's Dave Bucara, one of the seniors lawmen in the Northern Territory. And I think that's a really wonderful teaching in this time as well, because you can take care of country, and for Aboriginal people, the country is the mother. So by tending and caring for country, even if it's a little veggie garden that you're growing, or even if you're, you know, taking some vegetables that you grow and sharing them with a neighbour, that is also caring for country, or caring for yourself in country, like going out into the bush, or, you know, a walk where you can be with the trees and the sky and the sun and the moon. I mean, that is caring for country and caring for yourself in country. And I think that links in with metta and loving kindness, like loving kindness towards country. I don't mean nation country, I mean country, earth. Like that is metta for earth. And you know, because I really link in with the Aboriginal teachings here, earth here is mother. So it's just got a beautiful kind of caring for the earth is caring for the mother, and is also caring for ourselves. So I think that loving kindness meditation, metta, is such a beautiful teaching for now as well. Like I just get so much from it. And I know one begins with self-care, like loving kindness for oneself. But then as you do the practice and radiate it out, to do the meditation, loving kindness, metta for the world, I mean, start doing the kind of concentric circle, starting from oneself out. I found when I do that at the moment, it's a really healing, not just me, but healing. I can feel the sense of caring really outside of my own sheltering in place, if that makes sense. That the power of that meditation, of metta.
I meant to mention earlier, Jen, about the Aboriginal word Diri, which means
Diri.
Yeah.
Yeah. which is sharing. We're doing the Diri now. Is a sharing.
Yeah.
Talking together, being together is the Diri. There's Sangha too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very nice. Ayya, would you like to say just something around, just on that issue of practice?
Yeah.
Ritual?
Yeah. When Jeni mentioned when the care for the country, then the country cares for you, I instantly thought, of course, of our Buddhist saying that if you care for the Dhamma or if you protect the Dhamma protects you. Mm. And I really, really do rely on that. Mm. As a Buddhist nun, I have to rely on that. And I just, that's one of the basic, major, main things that I can do. I can protect the Dhamma and hope that the Dhamma really protects me and that I receive the support then from that. Before Jeni had said that, I would have mentioned that most probably compassion would be the thing that we can practice to get that running, to keep our shelter in place safe for us, but also to get out. I mean, there's compassion for us, for our safe place, for our shelter, but compassion, more than metta or loving kindness, also cares for others. So I think compassion should practice the most, probably now.
I think we're almost.
And there was one thing that I thought of earlier, just because I'm always trying to look at the bright side. Germany, for example, will this year comply with the climate restrictions due to the virus, because not many airplanes, not so many cars and so on. So only by 4 weeks shutdown or isolation of the people, we suddenly can comply. It's suddenly possible.
Mm-hmm. Awakening.
Right. Yes.
We can do it.
Well, just real quick, I noticed a question about Ratana Sutta.
Yes.
In the Ratana Sutta, the Buddha spoke words of truth, and by the power of each of these phrases of truth, he called in there to be well-being. And I think the ultimate words of truth spoken in the Ratana Sutta have a particular power to them. This is the Jewels discourse. And I also, for me, it also highlights the necessity of living in truth, staying in truth, speaking the truth as part of our well-being and healing.
Mm-hmm. Ayya Phalanani said some beautiful things on chanting this morning as well, and the power of that. It was quite. I recommend people go back and listen to her talk as well. Before we close, is there anything that any of the panel would like to add before the end of the session?
The safe journey, everybody. Everybody, safe journey.
I'd like to add, I think of myself as an opportunistic do-gooder. See what you can do of good. Even prayer in your heart is powerful. Think of it that way. So whatever you can do to reach out and give some love to the suffering world, go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I can just say, be well, everyone, and keep on the practice, keep on the good work. Let's make awakening truth, no?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye. Bye.